Integrator Media today is at Gartner event with Mr. Nadji Raib, Senior Area Director, Southern Europe and Middle East, SecurityScorecard. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Perfect.
Moving
Nice to
towards
hear.
getting some insights from your side. So, SecurityScorecard claims to work towards making the world a better place. So, can you provide an overview of the company's mission and purpose, how it contributes to this goal?
Yeah, exactly. The mission, you stated it yourself. Our CEO always say that we're striving to make the world a safer place. Of course, SecurityScorecard empowers companies to have a score-based approach on their externally facing assets and also give them a possibility to understand how is their cyber exposure. We don't do it only for the company themselves, but also we do it for their third parties and their fourth parties. We will come to third parties later on. It's a very simple letter graded approach from an A to F, where you have an A, obviously you are exposing less, but also more secured from an external point of view. When you have an F, you're exposing a lot and you are actually getting a higher risk of exposure and exploitation as well.
As you just mentioned about third parties, so moving towards that third party intelligence, what specific challenges do organizations face in managing these risks?
Well, absolutely. So third party, vendor risk management, TPRM, these are all buzzwords that are happening all over the world. We see regulators pushing for these areas to be taken seriously and to be an area of focus. Now, when you look at obviously the digital transformation that happened, I would say from 2017 onwards, everybody is using cloud infrastructure, SaaS services, PaaS services. They move into their CRM, their payment processes, their lawyers. We've seen so many breaches that are happening via third parties. The latest statistic shows that over 2/3 of breaches happen via the supply chain. So SecurityScorecard sits on more than 12 million scored companies. So we have that gold mine of data that could be leveraged to understand and continuously assess the third parties of companies as well. So imagine I'm a company, I want to understand how my ecosystem is doing of supply chain, especially the critical one. We are able to give them an instant and a continuous view of the external exposure of those third parties.
So coming towards your presence at the Gartner's event, so what motivated the company to conduct a UAE Cybersecurity Supply Chain Threat Report?
So we are the only company that has been invited twice to the World Economic Forum. Our CEO was present in there with our exec team, and we met a lot of decision makers and a lot of world leaders. We did this study, but it's not really a unique study. We do a lot of studies in all over the places, but we focus on areas where there will be more adversaries as well. Critical national infrastructure is important for every country. We did studies in the US, did studies in Europe, we're doing study in UAE, and potentially, of course, other studies will come in the near future.
In this study you just mentioned, so can you point out or tell any significant findings or trends you find in this report?
Yeah, I wasn't part of the report making myself, but I read the report. It was very significant insight. There's one thing that I really like to read is obviously where you see a higher GDP per capita in terms of countries like wealthier countries, you see that the cyber resilience is higher. And the study obviously looked at 30 top companies per revenue in UAE, and 90% of those companies have a score of an A. And as I said earlier, the score of an A means that you are quite resilient and you're showing less from a hacker perspective. And about, I think, was like 10% with a score of a C and below. That means they expose risks from an external point of view. But a study showed something also very important. If you come back to the third-party supply chain, over 73% of those 30 companies had in their ecosystem of supply chain a company that had already been breached. So this is quite important. Let's take us back into the supply chain scenario. That's why the regulators, when we look at the FIS in this country, when you look at DORA and NISA in Europe, when you look at other SAMA in Saudi Arabia, they're all calling for a continuous monitoring of supply chain, especially the critical ones.
That is quite interesting. The report looks very statistical and very interesting. So, as you just mentioned, that SecurityScorecard conducts a lot of studies and a lot of you can say notable researches.
Yeah.
So, are there any notable differences or similarities you found in the study that you just conducted of UAE as compared to the other studies that are conducted globally?
Absolutely. So when you say locally, it means like other countries, other regions and so on. Like as I said earlier, The GDP per capita played a role. So wealthier countries are simply paying more attention to cyber resilience, and they are more aware of the latest threats, including supply chain, I would say, threats. And now when you look at other regions, perhaps less, perhaps more, we sit on a lot of data. We are able to do this analysis on a more country-based, regional-based, but the ones that we've done are completely different than each other, because you see similar trends from a supply chain perspective, but when you look at CNI, yeah, when you look at healthcare, when you look at finance, when you look at energy, when you look at the critical national infrastructure for a country, yeah, these are most important elements for each country. When you look at them, they all facing threats. That's the common trends between all of them. But then when you look at specific stuff, you could see more countries closed up, where they don't have less supply chain than the others, and other countries, to scale, they need to go to more supply chain and involve more SaaS and more cloud and so on. So that is maybe the difference. So a country where you see a higher GDP, you will see a more opening and more risk, or a bigger risk, and maybe another country where you see less opening, less international exposure, you probably will see their CNI quite restricted as well. They reduce the risk, yes, but the scalability and the access to their services and the knowledge about them and the reputation is also less.
So moving forward, does SecurityScorecard plans to conduct similar kind of studies for GCC region?
Absolutely. This is something that we are intending to do. We can do it, as I said earlier, per country, and we can also do it for the region. We've done also a study about the critical national infra, the latest trend. We've done a lot of studies in terms of the supply chain impact on companies, and also even basically sometimes governments. Because again, coming back to the CNI, this is not a matter of security only for the company themselves or only for the country's government. It's also for the people. When we talk about water, sewage, when we talk about finance, banking, if the banking system stops, would you be able to pay your sandwich tomorrow? I'm sure you can't. So this is an important element for us, and we are willing to conduct more and more researches to open the eyes of world leaders, maybe decision makers within large companies, critical national infrastructure responsible people as well, to make sure they are aware of the risks they face and how we can help them to alter their risk as well.
So thank you for joining, and thank you for sharing such insights with us.
Well, it's been a pleasure as well. Thank you for hosting me.